could there actually be some reality to those myths of a former golden age? Now, our kind of human being, anatomically modern human beings, have existed on Earth for at least 300,000 years. Probably longer, but at least 300,000 years. And yet, if we listen to mainstream archaeology, there was no such thing as civilization until 5,000 years ago. So the question is, what were we doing for those 295,000 years? We had the brains, we had the anatomically modern form, but we appear not to have created civilization until 5,000 years ago. Or is it possible that we did create an earlier civilization? And that through changes in the earth we have forgotten about it. This is what I call the house of history. It's the way we're taught about history and prehistory in school. We start with the Stone Age, which archaeologists refer to as the Paleolithic. And the Stone Age is divided into two stages, the Paleolithic and the Mesolithic. Sometimes the Mesolithic these days is referred to as the Upper Paleolithic. And then after that we have the Neolithic, about 11,000 years ago, and then we go on into the early development of agriculture, and then the first civilizations about 6,000 or 5,000 years ago. And it seems to be a very well worked out timeline, and there doesn't seem to be any room in it for a lost civilization. But new evidence has come to light, which archaeology has not yet taken account of. And this new evidence concerns a global cataclysm. A global cataclysm referred to as the Younger Dryas cataclysm that occurred between 12,800 years ago and 11,600 years ago. And it's right there in the foundations of the house of history. And if archaeologists do not take account of it, then it's possible that they've given us a completely misleading story of human civilization, an extinction-level global cataclysm. I think everybody is familiar with the story of the dinosaurs. We all know that the dinosaurs were made extinct by a cosmic impact, either an asteroid or a comet, which hit the Earth 65 million years ago. In fact, the most recent information is that it was almost certainly a comet rather than an asteroid. One of the differences between comets and asteroids is that comets travel extremely fast, much faster than asteroids, and therefore they pack a great deal of kinetic energy. The scientists who exposed the cataclysm that brought the dinosaurs to extinction began with evidence from a layer in the soil, a layer of earth, a very blackened, burnt layer of earth, which contained what scientists refer to as impact proxies, the kind of chemical and molecular results of a powerful impact which is bringing great heat and great shock, and they include iridium, carbon microspherules, nanodiamonds, shocked quartz, and melt glass. You know, when the nuclear explosions were first set off, when they were testing nuclear bombs in America, they found that the heat was so great that it would turn sand into glass. And in these layers of soil, they found the same kind of features that they found in powerful nuclear explosions. So there's that impact spherule layer. That was the first clue that something terrible had happened to the world 65 million years ago. But the scientists, they were a father and son team, Lewis and Walter Alvarez, who made this discovery, for the first 10 years when they proposed this discovery, they were subjected to the most savage and severe attacks from other scientists. Other scientists refused to believe that such a cataclysm could have occurred, and they wanted to find some other explanation. And they kept saying, you know, you've shown us the impact proxies, the nanodiamonds, the carbon spherules, and so on, but you have to show us the crater before we'll believe you. And it took them 10 years, but eventually they found the crater. The crater is in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's deeply buried beneath the Gulf of Mexico, partly beneath the Yucatan Peninsula and partly in the Gulf of Mexico itself. Since the discovery of that crater, there's been no more argument, and it's generally accepted that it was a comet that made the dinosaurs extinct. These extinction-level events, these world-changing events, change everything. Of course, this is a joke, but they turned, what happened with this event was it turned dinosaurs into chickens. It was that bad. Because chickens are all that's left of the dinosaur line. Chickens and birds in general, huge creatures became extinct. At the same time that when the dinosaurs were masters of the world, skulking in the primeval forests was a little mammal. Looked like this, it was kind of shrew. But that mammal is ancestral to all of us. What happened when the dinosaurs were made extinct was that the mammals that had been going nowhere suddenly had an opportunity that they could expand into. And the mammalian line began to evolve very rapidly, and so that's why we say, meet your 65-million-year-old mother. It's a fact. The human race would not be here if the dinosaurs had not been swept out of the world. So these extinction-level events are world-changing events. NASA would like us not to be concerned about them. They say it's not a problem. Events of that kind only occur once every 100 million years. I wonder how NASA know that. I wonder how they know and can tell us that the universe is so Germanic in its timekeeping that every 100 million years exactly it sends a cataclysm and otherwise there's no problem. Many scientists disagree with NASA's position, and I'm showing some of them here. The late Sir Fred Hoyle, Chandra Wickremesinghe, Victor Coote, Bill Napier, for example. They disagree with NASA's comfortable position, and they suggest that actually the cosmic environment of the Earth is much more dangerous than NASA tells us, and that it has been more dangerous for a very long time. Here's a curious thing about comets. There is not a single culture in the world where the appearance of a comet in the sky is regarded as good news. It's always regarded as bad news. There seems to be a tradition coming down from deep prehistory that there's something very dangerous and negative and worrying about comets. And you know what? That's absolutely correct. And we know that now because of what took place in 1994. Many of you will remember the case of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, which hit the planet Jupiter in 1994. The entire event being photographed and filmed by NASA. What Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 did is what actually all comets do eventually. It broke up into many different fragments. The original large object broke up into more than 20 fragments. Some of these fragments may have been as much as a kilometer in diameter. And those 20 fragments all hit the planet Jupiter, a swarm of comet fragments. And those impacts with the planet Jupiter were absolutely devastating. If those impacts had been upon the Earth, none of us would be here today. The combined explosive power of the impacts was 300 gigatons. If you were to take the entire nuclear arsenal of the Earth and blow it up all at once, it would be just 6.4 gigatons. So we have to understand that we're dealing with a cataclysm on an almost unimaginable scale. And this is the moment when I would like to say, thank you, Jupiter. Because Jupiter is the guardian of our planet, the giant guardian of planet Earth. Jupiter, circling in the outer solar system with its huge gravity, draws in most of the comets that would hit the Earth. It's been a friend to our planet for a very, very, very long time. It keeps on taking blows that otherwise would hit us. But every now and then, a comet gets through, and gets through into the inner solar system and into an orbit that crosses the orbit of the Earth. And actually, we are seeing bits of former comets all the time. I think everybody has seen shooting stars, meteors. And what NASA are explaining here is what a meteor shower actually is. Whether we call them the Leonids or the Perseids or the Orionids or the Taurids, all meteor showers are the remnant of a former disintegrated comet. Each one was once a whole comet, and it broke up into multiple fragments, some large, some small, and those fragments are the meteor shower. And again, NASA says we shouldn't worry about the meteor showers because most of the fragments in them are very small and they're very unlikely to hit the Earth. But again, a number of scientists are in complete disagreement with NASA on this. And they draw attention in particular to what is called the Taurid meteor stream. And it's called the Taurid meteor stream because it appears to come towards us from the direction of the constellation of Taurus. When you look up in the sky and you see the shooting stars coming in, they seem to be coming from the direction of the constellation of Taurus. Of course, they are not coming from Taurus, they're in the solar system, but visually that's where they appear to come from. We had an encounter with an object from the Taurid meteor stream in 1908. Unfortunately, that encounter took place over an uninhabited area of Russia. It took place over Siberia. It's called the Tunguska event, and it was a bit of the former giant comet that made up the Taurid meteor stream. It wasn't even a large bit. It was roughly a diameter between 100 and 200 meters. But what it did was it flattened 80 million trees across an area of more than 2,000 square kilometers. This object did not even hit the Earth. It exploded in the sky. But 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers of Siberia were completely destroyed. 2,000 square kilometers is bigger than the city of London. And if that object had exploded over any major city on Earth, we would all be very concerned about the Taurid meteor stream. But because fortunately it exploded over Siberia and nobody was killed, very little attention has been paid. This is a graphic. The Taurid meteor stream is, you can envisage it as a giant tube of debris. And within that tube there are many different filaments or threads of debris. And it's 30 million kilometers wide. And the Earth passes through it twice a year, in June and again in November. And each passage takes 12 and a half days. So for 12 and a half days, twice a year, we are in interaction with objects in the Taurid meteor stream. And yes, many of those objects are small, dust-sized objects. But known objects within it include Comet Encke, which is 5 kilometers in diameter, Comet Rudnicki, which is 5 kilometers in diameter, Comet Olgiato, 2 kilometers in diameter, and in fact, 19 of the brightest near-Earth objects are in the Taurid meteor stream. A very detailed astronomical study has been made of the Taurid meteor stream, and this article, published in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society in the UK, presents the conclusions, and the conclusions are that about 20,000 years ago, a very large comet got past Jupiter, and it entered the inner solar system. And it entered the inner solar system on an orbit that crosses the orbit of the Earth. For the next 8,000 years, nothing very much happened. The Earth and the comet kept missing each other. And the comet began to break up into multiple fragments, making it much more likely that there would be an encounter. And that encounter occurred roughly 12,900 or 12,800 years ago, when many different fragments of that comet hit the Earth, creating a gigantic cataclysm on Earth. And just as the astronomers have been studying the Tauride meteor stream, so also a group of geologists and earth scientists have been studying the consequences on the ground. And I'm showing some of these individuals here, and they include some very major and leading mainstream scientists. This is not, fringe material that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about mainstream science done by leading scientists in their field. And they started out investigating a mystery. And the mystery is to do with the last ice age. 21,300 years ago, approximately, the last ice age reached its maximum state. At that point, we had gigantic ice sheets covering North America and Greenland, and a gigantic ice sheet covering Northern Europe, with other ice sheets elsewhere. Now, of course, ice is frozen water. And what happens is that during an ice age is that the water that evaporates from the ocean falls and freezes as ice. And the result is that sea level gets much lower. So at the height of the ice age, when we had these two huge ice sheets, there was, for example, no Red Sea, there was no Persian Gulf, Australia was joined to New Guinea, the Malaysian Peninsula and Indonesia were a huge continent-sized landmass because sea level was 120 meters lower than it is today. It was very cold at the last place we met. The world was a freezing and inhospitable place. But then it began to warm up. And the warming by 14,000 years ago was bringing the world almost to the temperature that today. And then suddenly, 12,800 years ago, global temperature plunged. There was a sudden, massive deep freeze took place. And that deep freeze lasted for 1,200 years, from 12,800 years ago until 11,600 years ago. And then global temperatures shot up again. And the last of the ice sheets melted into the sea. And the interesting thing is that when we're taught about the story of the origins of civilization, the whole story is set in this period, after the Younger Dryas. And nobody's really paying much attention to
Dopo
what happened
quello che viene detto il
before.
Dryas più recente, nessuno parla mai di ciò che è successo prima, c'è questo piccolo lasso di tempo che è una sorta di punto interrogativo. Quindi questo episodio, detto il Dryas recente, è stato accompagnato da una estinzione massiccia di specie animali, soprattutto la megafauna, quindi mastodonti, che sono tutti estinti in questo periodo del Dryas recente.
L'epicentro del cataclisma sono state le Americhe, l'America del Nord e l'America del Sud, quindi le Americhe hanno sofferto la maggiore estinzione, ma è stata comunque un'estinzione globale che non ha riguardato soltanto l'America, ma era un'estinzione che riguardava
The first evidence for what happened takes the form of a layer in the soil, exactly as was the case with the extinction of the dinosaurs, except the extinction of the dinosaurs was 65 million years ago, and this soil layer is just 12,800 years ago. And it's full of exactly the same impact proxies, the iridium, the nanodiamonds, the melt glass, and so on and so forth. And it's called the Younger Dryas boundary layer. I don't expect you to read these papers. I'm just putting them up on the screen to make it clear to you that we're dealing with something serious here. The work of these scientists has been published in all of the major peer-reviewed scientific journals, from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, to the Journal of Geology, to Nature, to Scientific Reports, and so on and so forth. This one from 2014, for example, in the Journal of Geology, is identifying a nanodiamond-rich layer across 3 continents, consistent with major cosmic impact 12,800 years before the present. This study is very important because it indicates the time frame under which the disaster unfolded. You know, there were some questions. Could it have been an event that unfolded over 200 or 300 years? What this study shows is that this event unfolded in a single, terrible day and night. Within a 24-hour period, the Earth was struck by this huge cataclysm, and it affected more than 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface. North America was the heart of it, but it affected Europe, and the furthest east they found evidence of impact is actually in Syria. And again, more recent work from this is from 2013, this is from 2017. The presence of platinum in the Greenland ice cores speaks eloquently of a comet impact. And now that same platinum layer has been found across North America as well. And platinum is very rare in the Earth's crust, but it is common in asteroids and comets. So the evidence continues to mount, and now at last the sites of a number of craters are being identified. It's important to be clear that the primary impacts, 12,800 years ago, took place on the North American ice cap. That ice was 2 kilometers deep at that time. The impact hits the ice and it creates a crater in ice. And it explodes an enormous amount of ice out of the crater. But it doesn't leave much of a crater on land because the ice has absorbed most of the effect of the impact. Nevertheless, around the edges of the ice cap, more and more evidence is being found of craters dated to 12,800 years ago. Particularly promising is the Presso crater, firmly dated to 12,800 years ago. So, although it remains controversial, I would say it's safe to say that 12,800 years ago, multiple fragments of a giant comet impacted the Earth. The evidence is that at least 4 of those fragments were objects in the range of 1 kilometer in diameter, 2 kilometers in diameter, and that those impacts were concentrated on the North American ice cap, but the resulting climate disaster was worldwide. So you get your impacts on the ice cap, and one thing that happens when you get this tremendous shock and heat of an impact on ice, it's going to melt a lot of that ice, and it's going to melt it very, very fast. It sends that water into the ocean, but it also sends it south across the continental United States. And the evidence for that is very powerful on the land in North America, particularly if you go to northwest of the United States, the Pacific Northwest and the state of Washington in the Pacific Northwest, where there's a phenomenon, geological phenomenon called the channeled scablands. And it's been recognized for a long time that this chaotic landscape was the result of flooding. But it's been very controversial as to what caused that flooding. I could spend hours going into the various theories, but I want to cut a long story short. And the mystery is solved entirely by the comet evidence. If you get multiple fragments of a large comet hitting the North American ice cap, it generates the heat that you would need to melt a large enough area of the ice cap to cause that landscape devastation. For example, this is a Google Earth image from the channeled scablands, and we're looking down here on a fossilized waterfall. That's one of the sections of the waterfall, and it also continues all the way around here. And that waterfall, the geologists have discovered, was formed, this whole landscape feature was formed within just 2 weeks. The water ran for 2 weeks and then stopped, leaving a dry, fossilized feature. This water here is just rainwater that has pooled at the bottom, but there is no water flow over the site now. So I'm with a fellow researcher, his name is Randall Carlson, and we're down at the bottom of one of the parts of that ancient fossilized waterfall. And here we are overlooking it. That's that fossilized waterfall. Now, it's difficult for you to get a sense of the size of this waterfall. But I think everybody's familiar with Niagara Falls, right? World famous Niagara Falls. So let's put Niagara Falls in this picture. That's Niagara Falls to scale with the rest of Dry Falls. And Niagara Falls is the result of more than 12,000 years of the work of the river, whereas Dry Falls were created in just 2 weeks. What is flowing over, what is creating this fossilized waterfall was a giant flood. And that giant flood was not just water. It was filled with whole forests that had been ripped up by their roots. It was filled with rubble and boulders and thick mud. And most of all, it was filled with icebergs, because the ice cap had been shattered and flooded, and icebergs broke off it. And so you're dealing with a slurry of thick, erosive material, which is cutting out the landscape and creating features like this. And then when the flood stops, the feature is left as a fossil. For example, this is the town of Wenatchee in the Pacific Northwest. Down here at the bottom of the valley, and up here at the top of the valley. The top of the valley is 500 feet above the bottom of the valley. But this rock lying here doesn't come from this area. It comes from more than 100 kilometers further north. How did it get there? How did it end up on the side of this valley? And it's a really big rock. That's me standing on top of it. Actually, this rock is calculated to weigh 18,000 tons. And it got there in an iceberg the size of an oil tank. That iceberg was carried on the floodwaters 500 feet deep. It caught against the valley side and it was trapped. As the floodwaters receded, the iceberg was left on the valley side. The ice melted away and exposed this huge boulder that it was carrying. Many icebergs contain rocks. And it's not alone. In that part of North America, right across the landscape, you can see thousands of giant iceberg rafted rocks like this. This one, they actually call this Boulder Park, because there's so many of these huge rocks, each one of which was carried there in an iceberg, and each one of which testifies to the gigantic scale of the cataclysm that swept North America. We've all been to the beach, and we all know what current ripples are. As the tide goes out, the water creates patterns on the sand. And the patterns are quite small. You might have, they might be a few centimeters high and a few meters in length. But if we go to the Pacific Northwest, to the Camas Prairie in America, we find current ripples that are on a truly gigantic scale. You know, nature is fractal. What it does at a small scale, it can also repeat at a large scale. And it repeated it at a large scale on the Camas Prairie. We're in the middle of the Camas Prairie here. That's a car. Those are the ripples. And that's to give you a sense of the scale of this. We must imagine the most forceful and enormous flood of water that is capable of creating ripples that are 30 feet high and 300 feet in length. And in fact, we've been talking about this part of North America, but the evidence for the disaster continues all the way across North America. Whether we're talking about the St. Croix River in Minnesota with these gigantic potholes, or whether we're talking about the Finger Lakes of New York State, they're all the results of flooding. And a very recent study has drawn attention to something else that had not been considered properly before, which is to do with precisely what happens when you have a massive impact on an ice cap. The Laurentide ice sheet, an impact around here, would excavate a crater in the ice and would send out on ballistic trajectories ice boulders, which would be cast off in all directions round about.